Welcome to the 6-5 podcast. I'm your host today, Daniel Newman, joined by my co-host and always fun to chat with, tech analyst, partner in crime on the 6-5, Patrick Moorhead. Good morning, Patrick Moorhead. How are you doing today, buddy?
Daniel, I'm doing well. You know, I pull the string behind my back when anybody asks me that, but I'm going to do it again, which is I really can't complain. I have it so much better off than other folks, my friends and family. They're safe. They're healthy so far. I really have nothing to complain about. A little bit stir crazy, but you know, it has been nice staying home. I've never slept better or exercised more in the last decade.
Yeah, the cabin fever is real. I'm not going to lie about that. But the actual opportunity for us, because we're safe, because right now we're all healthy, to stay home, spend time with my kiddos. I realize I've had more time at home in the last 30 days than I would have had in a year. It's about a year's worth of time at home in a month.
Oh, wow.
And that's really nice. I mean, you know, we were doing 47 weeks. We had 27 events canceled. For me, between now and June, the fall is looking like, even if we do sort of reopen, it's going to still be light. I think the travel will come back very slowly, which is, you know, it's nerving because it's unnerving, I guess you could say, because, you know, we're used to a certain lifestyle, but at the same time, like you said, you know, we're able to keep our bodies fit, brains fit. So this is good stuff. And if you're watching this live on the video, you'll see we are enhancing our format. So this is still available on a podcast. And so for those of you listening on Apple iTunes, it's something to check out. But on YouTube and on a few other channels, we're going to be actually doing these on video now in a live type produced format. We're excited about that. So we got a good show today, a little bit more of our normal 6-5 podcast format. We've been doing a lot of interviews lately. We've done a number of kind of special shows during the COVID-19 crisis because we just didn't feel it was news appropriate to be, you know, talking about. But as you know, just yesterday, President Trump, love him or hate him, did announce some efforts to start opening up certain parts of our economy, which is positive. And I think as that starts to happen, Pat, we need to start discussing what's going on in tech again, right?
Exactly. And I think it's all about timing. I think you and I both agree that, you know, there were certain stages that companies should be speaking and what they should be talking about. And, you know, after the health and safety, it moves into keeping the world from going into a recession or a depression. And in a way, we've got to get this show moving. So let's get the show moving, Daniel.
Get the show on the road. So everyone out there, just a reminder, the 6-5 podcast, it is deep analysis. We talk about things that happen in the news, but we don't talk about the news. We analyze what's going on in big tech. And for everyone else out there, we do have to do our little reminder. This show is for information and entertainment purposes only. So while we will be discussing publicly traded companies, we may even discuss things like earnings and performance of these companies. We are not soliciting or providing investment advice. Don't do what we say, but enjoy and have fun with us here on the show. So let's kick it off, Pat.
Right.
Big week.
Yeah, it was a big week.
And in the theme of we must move forward, we've seen big tech, specifically the big OEMs, the ones that provide most of the equipment that goes in the data center, that resides at the edge, and in some cases even that puts the computers and keyboards in at our fingertips and devices. We've heard a lot. HPE, Cisco, and Dell, just to name a few for sure, have made massive commitments to support companies that are going to invest in digital transformation in the wake of COVID-19. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I really applaud HPE, Dell, and Cisco to making big commitments, financing commitments to move businesses forward. And the timing was amazing because all three companies did it the same week, almost like they were working together, which obviously they weren't. For the sake of this show, I don't think the compare contrast between the three programs is important. You can read that in our articles and make them up for and look them up for yourself. I think the bigger picture here is that businesses are having issues. And so what these companies did, Cisco made a $2.5 billion commitment. HPE made a $2 billion commitment. And Dell really made a channel commitment. And what they're doing is reinforcing that, you know, hey, we had 8.5 billion under financing in 2019, and we're adding certain elements to that to help our customers out. And a lot of these had no payment or limited payment for the first 90 days. HPE had 1% each month. Dell really focused on the channel, which is one-time cash payout, 50% of current partner MDF funds. They extended, like an airline, they extended unspent earned MDF and BDF scheduled between March and July of July 24th, 2020. But as I dived in or dove in, the plans had some similarities. I absolutely appreciated that HP and Cisco put a dollar amount on it, because it just makes it easier for folks like us. But I also appreciated when I talked to Dell Technologies, how they said, hey, you know what? It's not actually this easy. Let me give you some of these details. And essentially what this is doing is keeping their partners and customers in business, which I think is a good thing, not only for the companies, but also for the world as a whole. And it is interesting. I'll make one interesting thing is I didn't see this from Azure, AWS, GCP. We did see from the work at home collab folks, freebies all over the place, but I'm surprised that I haven't seen the public cloud folks dive into this.
Yeah, it has been interesting to watch that, because that was something I was suspicious of as companies started to run into hardships, that the public cloud companies might step up and offer deferred, especially because the margins are extraordinary compared to like an OEM like a Dell or HPE or Cisco, where their equipment has a lot more cost. But I think from a balance sheet standpoint, the assets can also be put on a books a little bit differently. So there's a little bit of a financial equation there, because there's an asset to use as a lever for these companies. So if they put in the financing gets paid, it doesn't get paid. They have that. It's like repossessing a car, a server.
Right.
So it's a little bit different. But a couple of things I really want to just point out on this is, one is I was impressed by the phased responses of these companies. Almost all of them had a phased response of what the company offered during the time when it wasn't time to sell. Whether it was Aruba doing the massive investment in the wireless infrastructure to help set up pop-up hospitals that we talked about. That was like a $50 million investment. Cisco was one of the first that came out with that $225 million support to COVID. And it was primarily through free services, but also cash. And now they're kind of saying, okay, as we get restarted, this is the next phase. The next phase is companies are going to need to make investments in transformation. We are going to enable that, and we are going to support that investment and use our strong balance sheet, our strong positions, to be able to help defer some of that cash inflow from smaller companies and businesses and get them started. It's good stuff, Pat. It's good analysis. Let's jump to the next topic. This one will be a little bit faster and harder hit, but NVIDIA. So NVIDIA has been doing a lot of things during this as well, and especially making big commitments of its GPU horsepower to supercomputing, which we've heard a lot about. And NVIDIA has also been quite a popular tool with its new GeForce Now for gamers that have been stuck at home for the last couple of months.
Right.
But there's a side of NVIDIA's business that doesn't get talked about quite as much as the others, and that's the enterprise side. And on the enterprise side, the company has really become the standard in many cases when it comes to training, and it's growing its prowess in inference. And one of the things that it had out there for quite some time has been the acquisition of Mellanox.
Yeah.
And as we know, with these big acquisitions, we've seen it with we see it countless times with almost every major global acquisition. They can get held up by different governing bodies. Well, NVIDIA had been waiting for an approval from China to move forward. And right now is an interesting time to be trying to get the support of China. We're in a very interesting predicament in the world. But the the country went forward and gave its governing body on mergers and acquisitions, gave NVIDIA the green light to acquire Mellanox. And Mellanox, it's a GPU designer. They're a significant. I think the price was about 6.9 billion, but I think the bigger thing here is it's going to expand NVIDIA's prowess. It expanded the prowess even further into offering data center GPUs. That's going to make the company even harder to catch, which is going to be the challenge, especially for the big chip companies like AMD and Intel, who are both kind of, I would say, chasing overall NVIDIA in this space and trying to become more relevant. But NVIDIA, between their software, their frameworks, their hardware, Pat, they continue to show leadership, and this investment's just one more thing. And getting this to go forward, I think, is a big feather in NVIDIA's cap, and it's going to make them stronger coming out of this COVID-19 and pandemic as we get the economy going again.
Yeah, that was a good business take on it, Daniel. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the technologically why NVIDIA needs to do this. So, as we all know, Moore's law is slowing down. There's only so much compute you can put on a chip. And once you start running out of the ability to put something on a single chip, then you need to figure out, how do you make chips talk to each other? And NVIDIA currently connects their chips with PCIe and NVLink. And then you have to figure out, how do I connect these systems together? And Mellanox is primarily known as an HPC InfiniBand networking company. So how do you connect the racks of HPC equipment to the other one in a fast way? And there's the InfiniBand class, and then there's Ethernet, which enterprise is on. But what's happening is they're coming together. So where I think this takes NVIDIA is how do I make a better cluster, or how do I make a cluster that's not a cluster of computers that's not like a full fleet of racks, but even smaller. And if you look at what Intel's doing with CXL, which is a high-speed interconnect, if you look at what HPE and Cray are doing with their interconnect, it makes perfect sense to me. So technologically, this is something that makes a lot of sense for NVIDIA. And what they can do is they can walk into an HPC client, either a top 500 or somebody who's in an enterprise, and say, listen, I have GPU, I have high-speed networking for you, and somewhere in there, Daniel, could be a CPU. They have done ARM-based CPUs, but not the big ones. They've still primarily leveraged Intel's Xeon for that.
Yeah, I think the fabric is a big part of what this acquisition enhances. And it's going to is going to really create scale to what can be done with, I guess, kind of that whole, not Moore's law, but more is less when it comes to compute power. And that's been sort of every company's kind of trying to do that. How do we do more with less? How do we shrink down the actual hardware footprint required to take on massive workloads for AI? So big move, and good to see it get approval. We've seen some interesting things kind of fall apart over the last few years because of trying to get different approvals from different, different governing bodies. So let's jump on to the next one. Speaking of China and speaking of global, so MediaTek, kind of what I would say a mid-tier provider of SoCs, stocks for smart devices. A number of, when you think of like Oppo, you think of Xiaomi, Huawei in some cases, oftentimes providing that. Basically, the company, there was a write-up in Anantech that came out this week, and one of your analysts at Moor Insights, Pat, Anshul Sag, wrote a really interesting piece on this, but you and I covered it as well across. Yeah. The company basically got caught by Underwriter Laboratories just blatantly cheating. They were creating special modes in their devices from a testing standpoint that allowed the performance benchmarks to function and operate at levels that the devices just simply would never operate at on a day-to-day basis. And the, MediaTek was caught, and Underwriters Labs actually delisted these devices, or delisted the benchmarks of these devices. And now it's kind of become a big scandal. But more interesting, MediaTek is kind of taking a hard position on this. They're really not acknowledging any of the claims against them. What are your thoughts on this? What do you think's happening here? What do you think's going to happen?
Well, I was surprised the first two times that I saw vendors get caught up on this over the last 2 years, because this isn't the first time people have quote unquote whitelisted something, which essentially says when you run a specific benchmark, an executable, it goes into some mode that your phone will never actually operate in. So, if your car was limited at 5,000 RPMs, let's say, before the manufacturer thought it would blow up, this would go to 10,000 RPMs. And multiple companies were caught cheating. First, it was some phone makers, and then it was some chip makers. But MediaTek walked right in, bad behavior that busted these folks. And the worst part about it is, UL Laboratories, we typically think of as the people who make sure something's safe electrically. They bought the leading mobile benchmark company, Futurum, and now they're called UL Benchmarks. And what they do is they have like a leaderboard, right? You go to UL Benchmarks or Futurum, you'll see the top phones that get the best benchmarks. And companies, obviously, because there are people, particularly in China and particularly Android enthusiasts around the country who do care about performance. And there's a leaderboard. Well, UL pulled those phones down. And these are phones from Sony, Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, and one called Realme. And you're like, well, I haven't heard of Realme before, but they're actually a player inside of India. And I think what this does is it bodes poorly, and I don't know what's worse, MediaTek cheating or their response to it, which was basically, listen, we just enable it, and our partners do it. So I felt that they threw their customers under the bus, which is literally the last thing you want to do as a manufacturer. So I don't know who's calling the shots or who is communicating over there, but this is something that damages your reputation for a long time. And Daniel, you talked about where MediaTek is a player in the smartphone market, right? They're a second tier player compared to the likes of Qualcomm, Huawei's HiSilicon, and even Samsung's own semiconductor unit. But MediaTek actually is the largest producer of chips for smart TVs. So those non-Samsung televisions, smart TVs that you have, are pretty much fueled by MediaTek. And I'll bet you MediaTek's TV customers are wondering, those tests that I did on performance, I wonder if they're actually the best chip for TVs. But anyways, it's a big deal in the chip market. Qualcomm's response was very clear. We don't do this. We're delivering true performance, which they kept it short and sweet. Congrats to Qualcomm. I'm thinking they'll get some more mid-range business from these players listed up here, because all these players, Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, Sony, and Realme, are all Qualcomm customers. What they were using MediaTek for their mid-range.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're going to see, because Qualcomm's also been pretty aggressive in expanding its own mid tier. And the thing is there really are no low tier Qualcomms. There really aren't even any mid tiers. They de-feature just slightly, but the performance benchmarks on even their mid tier, what they consider a mid tier product, like a 7 series product, are still very high performing specs. And even even 5G variants, in the works. So I expect Qualcomm will continue to take market share because the products continue to show to be the premium in so many cases. We've seen it with the Apple iPhones, and in the past when it's been when Apple's tried to distribute its chip making beyond Qualcomm, and we've seen it now here with this particular case where companies getting caught in the crosshairs. So we got to watch this. We have to watch demand. I don't know if end customers will care, if I'm being completely forthright, but I think the partners should care. The people in the channels developing products that need to perform, and as quality matters more and more with the deployment of 5G, it will matter that people's phones and devices are able to perform at the level they expect. So let's move on to the next thing, Pat. Every quarter, Canalys does a PC shipment write up, and the company does a good job of tracking market share. And so one of the things you and I have talked a lot about during this COVID-19 is work from home and the growing demand on PCs. So it was interesting to watch what happened in the first quarter, because there was another side of the story which really came down to supply chain, with China being one of, if not the largest place where chips for PCs are produced. What was going to happen to shipments? Because we clearly have a lot of demand. By the way, second quarter will be really interesting to watch, because that's when the demand really spiked here, was March and into April. But first quarter was down, Pat. It was down 8%. And it's interesting because the analysis that you and I have had has been demand is going to go through the roof with more work from home, with more distributed workforces, and with companies needing more horsepower in every employee's hands. The investments in PCs was going to need to happen. And this was also evident by the fact that it was very difficult to buy a PC once we got shut down. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. So the numbers came in down 8%. And I basically attribute it to two things. I attribute it to, one, we have to realize that between January and March, China had at least a 50% of that period where it was operating at less than full capacity in its supply chain. Certain factories were almost shut down entirely. As you and I found out, if there was a single case of COVID in the factory could have to shut down for as many as, I believe it was 30 days entirely. Right. So that was a very interesting potential hamper. The other thing, though, Pat, is that we are in the middle of a process technology turnover that's going on. And we're turning over from 14 nanometer to 10 nanometer, which for most consumers, that is irrelevant. But from a fab standpoint and from a build standpoint, this has caused delays in availability of PC chips now. And it's been going on. This isn't just happening this year, but this has been carrying over into this year, where Intel has done a tremendous job on data center chips and being able to support an increasing demand there. And that's where the company's had a lot of success. The PC chips have not necessarily caught up. And so we had two major factors. You had the actual, factory shut down, and you have a process technology turnover that hasn't completed yet. And so that's why we are seeing the numbers down. The only thing I want to point out, and I'm going to turn this back to you, is that this number should not scare people. This number should not make people feel like the PC market is in any sort of disarray. I want to be very clear. The PC market and the demand for PCs is going to skyrocket. Companies like Lenovo, HP, Dell all have huge upsides. Also, Apple had the biggest fall, 20%. Their fall, a little bit different than the PC makers, because the PCs, you got to remember, enterprises and schools are buying them in mass. And next quarter, I think you'll see a jump. Apple is a luxury product, though, purchased by small businesses, personal users, executives that usually are buying them separately as their own machine outside of the typical IT buy. That 20% does not surprise me. And I think Apple will have a harder time coming back if discretionary income stays down. Having said that, the $399 iPhone SE was brilliant. And Apple is going to sell a boatload of them. I'm just not sure how much it's going to cannibalize, but that's a little off topic. But hey, digressions are part of my style. Pat?
Yeah. So I'm really just going to summarize, I think, what you said. So the Canalys data is sales in. These are shipments in. Yep. Consumption is different. You have to sell something in to sell out. Retailers and distributors and commercial resellers were completely sold out, and they saw a massive uptick in sales out. It got so bad that companies were buying used equipment from brokers that sometimes you'll see show up on Amazon.com when you're searching for a PC. And when I talked to OEMs, there were enterprises that were saying, give me 10,000, give me 20,000. I need that now. The Apple thing, yeah, consumer discretionary income is directly related to Apple's success. Sure, there are some startups who like to use Apple equipment. There are some executives. There are what I call the market of companies who hate Microsoft, who have standardized on Apple, like IBM and Cisco. And you know, their entire corporations, they can use a Mac. So yeah, I think in Q2, Q2 is just going to be absolutely gangbusters now that China's back online.
Yeah, I think that's a good add to the analysis and good clarification on how it's measured, because I think people would say, well, if they're flying off the shelf at breakneck pace, why would it be down? Well, again, availability was down. They weren't shipped in. The stores didn't have enough product. So there was that's where all this pent up demand is coming from. And that's why we're going to see a big jump in the next quarter. Pat, there's some interesting news, and you've been tracking on IBM Z15, updating some of its security capabilities. I'll let you take this one.
Yeah. So first off, IBM Z mainframe, most credit card transactions and retail transactions are all done on an IBM Z mainframe. Mainframes are still very relevant, particularly when it comes to transaction processing and also security, because mainframes typically are in the most highly regulated industries out there. And security is important. What's become increasingly important as well is privacy. In fact, from July of last year until now, privacy fines were bigger than the losses from cybersecurity intrusions. When you have the EU, you now have California, you're going to have New York jump on the bandwagon here. And what was interesting is what you had on the security point was a new feature called Secure Execution for Linux. And I'm not going to go into the tech details. You can read my Forbes column if you want to get some of it. But essentially, it's the ability on virtualized environments, let's say you have an application here, an application here, to eliminate any potential crosstalk between them. And this is for KVM type of virtualization, because, you know, as much as virtualization is secure, if you talk to Oracle, if you talk to even AWS, they all have special modes that you can run applications in. So it eliminates the ability for any of those applications or data to slosh around. So if you add this to the secure passports, if you add this to the 27 other security and privacy features for IBM Z, they literally just keep raising the bar here.
Yeah, IBM, HyperProtect, some of the strategic moves the company has made with Linux One and the IBM Z mainframe series to enable security features to be in a hybrid environment. Because one of the big keys is a lot of people go, "Oh, mainframe, that's so yesteryear and that's old business." But the thing is for most major industries, especially those that have security and compliance, governance, and regulatory needs, mainframes are still part of the strategy. The problem is for these companies, data needs to be able to flow from the mainframe to the cloud in a secure fashion. This means significant encryption requirements and security requirements that really haven't entirely been figured out in a way that can be done and still meet all those compliance standards. And that's why IBM, for instance, recently made a big announcement with Bank of America in terms of being able to be its both on-prem and cloud partner. And this is going to become standardization in the banking and financial industry. So, don't downplay the importance of the mainframe for many industries. And this has been a big part of IBM's success. By the way, our IBM got a new CEO since our last regular podcast, and that certainly is going to provide some fire behind the company. So interesting announcements, Pat. Thanks for the chiming in and giving the depths. I'm going to close this up here. Yesterday morning, I woke up to an announcement by Verizon acquiring a company called BlueJeans. And probably if you listen to our show, you might have heard of BlueJeans. You've certainly heard about video conferencing and collaboration. In the wake of COVID-19, we've heard a lot about video and collaboration. There's been the Zoom boom. Cisco WebEx has exploded. Microsoft Teams jumped from 11 to 44 million daily users of the platform. Zoom has had almost that many bombings. Just kidding, not that many, not 44 million. But there's been a lot of action in video. BlueJeans is another company that offers a secure platform. And interoperability was one of its big focuses, helping companies that had a plethora of different hardware and equipment to securely and easily connect. But Verizon, a media company, one of their big acquisitions, for instance, being Yahoo, has been sort of spreading its wings, and it made a decision. And so I had a chance, and I wrote up an article about why the company would actually make this acquisition. So I want to talk a little bit about that and get your take, Pat. But Verizon is, at least in the domestic case of the U.S., on the forefront of millimeter wave 5G, the fastest 5G on the planet. The company also is definitely looked at, I would say, alongside with AT&T as the premium carrier. Now, T-Mobile and Sprint together will probably quickly find itself in that same bucket, but had typically kind of been third and fourth. But Verizon is by far more diversified. Verizon has a huge business services, cloud services, media. If you ever watch Yahoo TV, that's actually them. They have a big broadband and cable service business. So why video conferencing, though? And immediately comes to mind is that with 5G, a secure network, and connectivity, the work from home movement is going to drive a explosion in things like telemedicine, distance learning, and I would call it like remote financial advisory services and banking. And the challenge is most cloud-based video systems do not meet the security standards. So coming off the IBM topic, but with a dedicated connectivity of 5G and an application layer that could potentially sit as BlueJeans, as this video network, the company could become one of the preeminent providers of secure telemedicine solutions, secure remote banking solutions, and a secure distance learning. And I think what came to mind for me was the company made a really smart play. You've got millions upon millions of subscribers. You have the devices that are the primary use. We've got a rollout of what's going to be the ACPC, which, by the way, will be driven by the connectivity of a provider, of a service provider. And these companies can offer an application layer and video that could propel all these industries forward seamlessly. And so while I do think there will be an offering, Pat, on a traditional work from home and video, because that's something BlueJeans already did, I don't think BlueJeans and the acquisition by Verizon was the company trying to go after WebEx or go after Teams or go after Zoom. I really think it was, we want to build specialized applications, secure and compliance-driven industries that can allow point-to-point and small group secured video. And I think the company has a real shot of pulling it off.
Wow. I have a hard time not laughing. Daniel, maybe if you were in charge of Verizon, I would believe that. If I look at some of the pigs or what ended up, from AOL, Yahoo, and Exo Communications. And if you were running the company, Daniel, maybe this would happen. When it comes to SDK-based video, there's companies they could have bought for a lot less that are integrated into applications like Epic. A company called Video, VIDYO. You've probably never heard of them. Nobody has, but they already own multiple banks, multiple healthcare, and guess what? AWS Chime is integrated into multiple people's applications. Verizon knows nothing about creating high quality applications. They've demonstrated zero competence to be able to do this. And I'm sorry, AOL and Yahoo to me are not, I'm not saying you are, AOL and Yahoo to me is not evidence of any capabilities. I'm sure that technically there's competence there, but they're competing with giants as well. So, I'll see it when I believe it. Or
you'll believe it when you see it.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. So like, I actually didn't read your article. I didn't know your position until you started talking, which is why I'm so surprised. But it does make for a much better podcast when we don't agree with each other.
Well, let's just say that the proof will be in the pudding. But I see the vision. I don't necessarily claim that the company can or cannot execute, but I see the vision of it, and the key is the vision.
Just to let you know, I agree with that vision.
And that's okay. And the point is the executive team competent to deploy a successful strategy? I don't know, but what I do know is it will be one of the 3 leading providers of 5G connectivity on device.
Yeah.
And so if the belief is that we will launch these kinds of interactions from the device, and you need that secure connectivity, using the 5G network, not a Wi-Fi, not any sort of broadband, but 5G on device, the company could build an app that sits natively in the in the operating system on the devices that it distributes and sells. It's a possibility. Yeah. Will the company pull it off? That's a TBD, Pat. But carriers as a whole, as service providers of things like applications, is sort of an uncharted territory. The only difference with a company like Verizon is they also have that Comcast sort of arm, where it is media, it is buying up media, it is visible, it has the channel to be more visible. But I would say I believe the vision's there, you believe the vision's there. I'm probably more bullish than you on whether it can execute or not, but I'm certainly not saying it's going to displace anything that big collaboration's doing right now, but the vision makes sense. And we'll leave it there on that note. We'll leave it there.
We should have started with that one.
We should have started more interesting. No, it's okay. I listen. The position makes sense. The company that's trying to execute, maybe it doesn't. And so we'll see. Give it a year, give it 2 years. We'll see where the companies land. But for this episode of the 6-5, Pat, we've gone a little long, but it's been entertaining and it's been fun to do this on video. For those of you out there watching this, thanks for watching the 6-5 live television. For those of you listening to the podcast, hit that subscribe button. Stay with us. We appreciate you. We hope the shows will be getting
button.
Yeah, press the dang button. And we hope you're getting back to normal a little bit, at least every day, a little more normal. Hope everyone's healthy, wealthy, and happy. We appreciate you. Stay with us. For now, we're out of here. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.